Not everyone who shares your blood is meant to share your peace. Some people don't hurt you loudly, they hurt you slowly, through words that drain you, through control disguised as concern, through guilt that keeps you small. Islam does not command you to destroy your heart to keep others comfortable, and it does not require you to stay close to what is slowly breaking you, even if they are family. This reminder is not about rebellion, it is about wisdom. It is about knowing when distance becomes protection and when silence becomes strength. If someone consistently steals your peace, weakens your faith, or harms your soul, then staying away is not cruelty. It is obedience to the balance Allah teaches. Stay with me. Because today, we are talking about why protecting your peace is an act of faith. Peace is a trust from Allah, not a luxury. Peace is not something Allah gives you as an optional comfort. It is something He entrusts you with as an amanah. When Allah places peace in your heart, He does not do so for it to be repeatedly shattered, neglected, or sacrificed in the name of pleasing people. A woman of faith must understand this clearly. Your emotional well-being is not a luxury you earn after everyone else is satisfied. It is a responsibility you are commanded to protect. Islam does not teach believers to live in constant distress, anxiety, or inner chaos while calling it patience. True patience is practiced with dignity, not self-destruction. When peace is consistently disturbed, something sacred is being violated. Allah describes tranquility as a sign of His mercy, not something meant to be abused by others. A heart that is constantly wounded cannot worship with presence, cannot pray with focus, and cannot live with balance. Protecting peace is therefore not selfish. It is obedience to Allah's design for the human soul. Many women are taught to believe that peace is something they must give up to prove love, loyalty, or righteousness. But Allah never commanded His servants to trade inner stability for emotional suffering. The Prophet ﷺ taught compassion, mercy, and justice, not endurance of repeated harm. When peace is treated as optional, the heart becomes exhausted, resentful, and spiritually distant. This is not what Allah wants for His servants. Peace allows faith to grow, reflection to deepen, and character to remain intact. A woman who guards her peace is not rejecting others, she is honoring what Allah placed within her. When peace is lost, everything else begins to unravel. Slowly worship becomes heavy, gratitude fades, and the soul feels burdened. Allah does not ask you to live like this. Peace is also directly connected to accountability. If Allah entrusts you with something precious, you are responsible for how it is treated. Allowing constant emotional harm is not humility, it is neglect. A woman must ask herself whether the environments she stays in nurture her faith or drain it. Allah gave you the ability to choose, to step back, and to protect yourself. Using that ability is not a sign of weak iman, it is a sign of awareness. When peace is repeatedly disturbed, Allah may be calling you to reassess, not to endure silently. Reflection is an act of worship when it leads to healthier decisions. Peace must be guarded, because without it, the heart becomes vulnerable to despair and spiritual burnout. Some people confuse patience with passivity, but Islam does not praise silence in the face of ongoing harm. Patience is active, intentional, and grounded in wisdom. It does not mean allowing yourself to be broken emotionally while smiling outwardly. Allah values justice, even within personal relationships. Peace allows you to function with clarity, fairness, and compassion. Without it, reactions replace reflection, and exhaustion replaces sincerity. A woman who constantly lives without peace eventually loses her emotional balance, and this imbalance affects her faith. Protecting peace is a way of preserving the heart's ability to worship Allah sincerely. Peace is also essential for discernment. A restless heart struggles to see clearly. When emotions are constantly agitated, decisions become reactive rather than thoughtful. Allah encourages believers to act with wisdom, and wisdom requires inner calm. A woman who lacks peace cannot easily distinguish between what is harmful and what is merely uncomfortable. Protecting peace allows clarity to return. It gives the heart space to breathe, to reflect, and to seek guidance. This is why peace is not optional, it is foundational. When peace is treated as a luxury, guilt often follows any attempt to protect it. A woman may feel selfish for needing distance or boundaries, but Islam does not teach guilt for self-preservation. It teaches balance. Boundaries are not walls of hatred, they are doors of protection. Peace flourishes when boundaries exist. Allah knows the limits of the human heart, and He does not expect it to endure endless emotional strain. Protecting peace is honoring those limits. A peaceful heart is better equipped to forgive, to be kind, and to show mercy. Constant distress hardens the heart. Allah wants hearts softened by remembrance, not hardened by harm. When peace is preserved, kindness flows naturally. This shows that peace is not selfish, it is necessary for goodness. Allah also replaces what is protected for His sake. When a woman chooses peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and faith over fear, Allah compensates her in ways she cannot imagine. Peace opens doors that suffering never could. It strengthens reliance on Allah rather than on people. Peace allows a woman to stand before Allah with presence. It allows prayer to be sincere and worship to be light. This is why peace is an amanah. Without it, faith struggles to breathe. Peace is not a luxury, it is a trust from Allah. And guarding it is not optional, it is obedience, wisdom, and faith in action. Not all harm is loud, some is emotional and silent. Not all harm announces itself through shouting, violence, or visible cruelty. Some of the most damaging harm is quiet, subtle, and constant. It enters the heart through repeated criticism disguised as advice, control wrapped in concern, and guilt framed as love. A woman may not realize she is being harmed because nothing dramatic is happening, yet her peace slowly disappears. She feels drained, anxious, and emotionally small without knowing exactly why. Islam teaches us to be attentive to the state of the heart, because a wounded heart affects faith, clarity, and worship. Silent harm slowly erodes confidence and creates self-doubt. It makes a woman question her intentions, her worth, and even her relationship with Allah. Because this harm is not loud, it is often ignored or minimized, both by the person experiencing it and by those around her. But Allah does not measure harm by volume, He measures it by impact. Anything that consistently unsettles the heart, weakens faith, or steals inner calm must be taken seriously. Emotional harm often hides behind familiarity. When the harm comes from people we are close to, especially family, it becomes even harder to recognize. Words spoken repeatedly can wound deeper than a single outburst. Constant negativity, dismissiveness, or subtle humiliation shapes how a woman sees herself over time. She may begin to silence her feelings to avoid conflict, telling herself that patience requires endurance. But Islam does not require believers to absorb emotional wounds endlessly. The Prophet ﷺ never taught us to accept harm simply because it is quiet. Emotional harm that goes unaddressed accumulates and weighs heavily on the soul. A woman may find herself losing joy in worship, struggling to feel gratitude, or feeling distant from Allah without understanding the cause. These are signs that the heart is under strain. Silent harm often thrives because it is denied. The person causing it may claim good intentions, while the one suffering feels guilty for feeling hurt. This creates confusion and self-blame. A woman may ask herself if she is being too sensitive or ungrateful. Over time, this internal conflict becomes exhausting. Islam teaches clarity, not confusion. Allah is not pleased when His servants are constantly questioning their worth or suppressing their pain. Harm does not become acceptable simply because it is subtle or familiar. Emotional harm still harms, even if it comes without raised voices. Another form of silent harm is emotional control. This may appear as constant guilt, pressure, or manipulation that limits a woman's ability to make decisions freely. She may feel obligated to explain herself constantly or justify her boundaries. This erodes autonomy and creates emotional dependence. Islam values dignity and personal responsibility. When emotional control replaces mutual respect, peace is lost. A heart under control cannot rest. Allah did not create His servants to live under constant emotional surveillance. Silent harm also includes invalidation. When a woman's feelings are consistently dismissed or minimized, she learns to distrust her own emotional responses. This weakens her confidence and clarity. Islam teaches us to honor truth, including emotional truth. Pain that is repeatedly ignored does not disappear, it deepens. A woman may smile outwardly while carrying heavy sorrow inwardly. Allah sees this even when others do not. Over time, silent harm affects physical and spiritual well-being. Anxiety, exhaustion, and emotional numbness can develop. Worship becomes harder because the heart is burdened. Allah does not want His servant to worship from a place of constant emotional injury. Protecting the heart is part of preserving faith. Not all harm leaves marks that others can see, but Allah sees every wound. Emotional harm that is ongoing is not a test to endure forever, it is a signal to reflect. Islam encourages addressing harm with wisdom, not denial. Silence is not always patience. A woman of faith must learn to trust the signals Allah places within her heart. When peace is consistently absent, something is wrong. Ignoring silent harm does not make one righteous, it makes one exhausted. Allah values well-being alongside patience. Recognizing emotional harm requires honesty and courage. It means acknowledging that not all pain is dramatic, but all pain matters. Islam gives permission to step back from what wounds the heart, even when it is quiet. Not all harm is loud. Some is emotional and silent. And Allah does not ask His servants to remain where their hearts are slowly breaking. Family ties do not cancel boundaries. Islam places great honor on family ties, but it does not remove the responsibility of protecting the heart. Many women struggle with this tension, believing that love for family requires unlimited access to their emotional space. But Allah never commanded His servants to abandon wisdom in the name of closeness. Family ties are sacred, yet they are not permission for harm. Boundaries do not cancel kinship, they preserve it. A woman of faith must understand that honoring family does not mean absorbing emotional pain endlessly. Respect can exist alongside distance. Kindness can exist alongside limits. Allah values justice and mercy together, and boundaries are where that balance lives. When a woman establishes boundaries, she is not rejecting her family, she is protecting her peace so that resentment does not replace love. Islam does not glorify emotional exhaustion. It teaches responsibility, dignity, and balance in all relationships, including family. Many women feel intense guilt when they consider setting boundaries with family. This guilt often comes from misunderstanding religious teachings. Islam commands goodness to parents and relatives, but it does not command silence in the face of emotional harm. The Prophet ﷺ never taught us to endure repeated injury to prove righteousness. Boundaries are not rebellion, they are clarity. They communicate what is acceptable and what is harmful. Without boundaries, relationships deteriorate quietly through resentment, bitterness, and emotional withdrawal. Allah does not want family bonds to become sources of constant pain. Setting boundaries allows relationships to continue without destroying the heart. Family harm is often the hardest to acknowledge because it contradicts expectations. When harm comes from strangers, distance feels justified. When it comes from family, women are often told to endure, forgive, and stay silent. But Islam does not teach blind endurance. Forgiveness does not require proximity. Mercy does not require self-erasure. A woman can forgive while still stepping back. This distinction is crucial. Allah looks at intention and wisdom, not social pressure. Protecting one's emotional health allows forgiveness to be sincere rather than forced. Boundaries help prevent cycles of emotional harm. When behavior is never addressed, it often repeats. Silence can unintentionally enable mistreatment. Islam values accountability, even within families. A boundary is a form of communication that says, "This hurts me and it cannot continue." It is not an act of anger, it is an act of honesty. When boundaries are respected, relationships can heal. When they are violated, distance becomes necessary. Allah grants permission for both, based on wisdom. A woman who sets boundaries learns to differentiate between obedience to Allah and obedience to people. Obedience to Allah never requires emotional destruction. When family expectations conflict with mental and spiritual well-being, Allah's guidance comes first. This is not disloyalty, it is faith. A woman who prioritizes Allah learns to make decisions rooted in conscience rather than fear. Boundaries also protect faith. Constant emotional turmoil affects prayer, focus, and trust in Allah. A heart in distress struggles to worship with presence. Islam values the preservation of faith above maintaining appearances. When stepping back from harmful dynamics allows faith to recover, it is not only permissible, it is wise. Setting boundaries requires courage. Family pressure can be intense, and misunderstanding is common, but Allah supports those who choose truth with patience. A woman who remains respectful while firm walks a path of integrity. She does not insult, attack, or retaliate. She simply protects her space. Boundaries teach others how to treat you. When a woman consistently allows harm, it becomes normalized. When she sets limits calmly, she redefines the relationship. Even if others resist, Allah sees the effort and intention. Family ties are meant to be sources of mercy, not wounds. When they become sources of harm, Islam allows distance with dignity. Boundaries preserve what chaos would destroy. Family ties do not cancel boundaries, they require them, and when boundaries are set for Allah's sake, He brings peace where confusion once lived. When staying close weakens your faith, step back. Faith is the foundation of a believer's life, and anything that consistently weakens it must be taken seriously. When staying close to someone causes prayer to feel heavy, remembrance to fade, or obedience to feel inconvenient, that closeness needs reflection. Islam does not ask a believer to remain in environments that slowly pull the heart away from Allah. A woman may notice that after spending time with certain people, she feels spiritually drained, emotionally unsettled, and distant from her Lord. This is not coincidence. Allah places sensitivity in the believer's heart so she can recognize what nourishes her faith and what erodes it. Stepping back in such moments is not abandonment, it is protection. Allah values faith above social expectations, emotional comfort, and family pressure. When closeness compromises Iman, distance becomes an act of wisdom, not weakness. A weakening of faith does not always happen suddenly. Often it is gradual. A woman may miss prayers more easily, feel less motivated to seek knowledge, or find herself justifying behavior she once avoided. This slow erosion is dangerous because it feels subtle and manageable. Allah warns believers about paths that lead away from Him little by little. Staying close to influences that normalize sin, mock obedience, or dismiss spiritual effort quietly reshapes the heart. Islam teaches vigilance, not negligence. When a woman recognizes these signs, stepping back becomes a form of self-accountability. Allah does not punish awareness, He honors it. Some women remain close out of fear, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear of appearing ungrateful. But fear should never override faith. Pleasing people at the expense of obedience to Allah leads to inner conflict and spiritual exhaustion. Islam teaches that true honor comes from obedience to Allah, not approval from others. When staying close demands silence about values or compromise of principles, distance restores alignment. A woman who chooses faith over comfort chooses Allah, and Allah never abandons those who choose Him. Stepping back does not require hostility. Islam teaches dignity and respect even in distance. A woman can reduce interaction, limit exposure, and protect her heart without cruelty. The intention matters. When the intention is to preserve faith, Allah blesses the action. Boundaries rooted in Iman are not harsh, they are merciful. They protect the heart from confusion and the soul from hypocrisy. Staying close while pretending not to be affected often leads to resentment and inner conflict. Stepping back allows sincerity to return. Faith thrives in environments that support remembrance, humility, and growth. When closeness repeatedly exposes a woman to negativity, mockery of faith, or spiritual pressure, the heart begins to harden. Allah wants hearts softened by remembrance, not burdened by resistance. A woman who steps back from what weakens her faith creates space for healing, clarity, and spiritual renewal. This space is necessary for Iman to breathe. Islam teaches that companionship influences the heart deeply. The Prophet ﷺ warned about the impact of those we keep close. A woman must ask herself whether closeness strengthens her obedience or weakens it. This question requires honesty. Stepping back is not rejection, it is redirection toward what benefits the soul. Sometimes stepping back is temporary, allowing space for reflection and change. Sometimes it becomes permanent. Allah guides each heart differently. What matters is that the decision is rooted in faith, not anger. Distance chosen for Allah's sake carries reward. A woman who prioritizes faith gains inner strength. She becomes less vulnerable to pressure and more grounded in purpose. Her heart regains peace because it is aligned with Allah's guidance. This alignment is priceless. Stepping back may feel painful at first, but peace follows clarity. Allah replaces what is left for His sake with something better, if not in people, then in strength, tranquility, and faith. When staying close weakens your faith, step back. Allah never asks you to sacrifice Iman to maintain closeness. He asks you to protect it, because through faith, everything else finds balance. Guilt is often used to control, not to heal. Guilt can be a tool for growth when it leads to repentance and self-awareness, but it becomes dangerous when it is used to control rather than heal. Islam distinguishes clearly between healthy remorse and manipulative guilt. Healthy guilt draws a believer closer to Allah, encouraging accountability and change. Manipulative guilt, however, traps the heart in fear, obligation, and self-blame. A woman may be made to feel sinful for setting boundaries, selfish for protecting her peace, or disobedient for expressing pain. This kind of guilt does not heal the heart, it weakens it. Allah does not guide His servants through emotional coercion. He guides through mercy, clarity, and wisdom. When guilt leaves a woman feeling constantly anxious, confused, and spiritually burdened, it is no longer a sign of faith. It is a sign of emotional pressure. Islam never teaches believers to remain trapped in cycles of shame to prove righteousness. Guilt that controls silences the heart and clouds judgment, and Allah does not want His servants living under that weight. Many women confuse guilt with responsibility, especially in close relationships. They are taught that feeling guilty means they are caring enough, patient enough, or faithful enough. But Islam does not equate suffering with sincerity. Responsibility in Islam is clear, measured, and just. It does not demand emotional self-destruction. Manipulative guilt often appears as reminders of past favors, sacrifices, or expectations. A woman may be told that she owes endless tolerance because of family ties or past kindness. This creates an emotional debt that never ends. Allah does not place His servants in debt to people at the expense of their well-being. Gratitude does not require surrendering peace. When guilt is used to trap rather than guide, it becomes a form of control, not compassion. Healing guilt leads to growth, while controlling guilt leads to fear. A woman living under constant guilt becomes hesitant, apologetic, and unsure of herself. She may second-guess every decision, fearing that choosing peace is sinful. Islam, however, teaches that clarity brings tranquility. Allah does not want His servants paralyzed by fear of displeasing people. Pleasing Allah brings peace, not constant anxiety. When guilt prevents a woman from acting with wisdom and dignity, it is no longer aligned with faith. Guilt meant to heal opens the heart. Guilt meant to control closes it. Guilt is often used to silence truth. When a woman speaks about harm, she may be told she is ungrateful, dramatic, or disobedient. This shifts the focus away from the harm and onto her reaction. Over time, she learns to suppress her feelings to avoid guilt. Islam does not teach silence in the face of injustice. Allah values honesty, even when it is uncomfortable. Guilt that suppresses truth damages the soul. A woman who carries unspoken pain loses inner peace and clarity. Allah sees what is hidden, even when others deny it. Manipulative guilt also distorts faith. It replaces Allah's mercy with fear and replaces guidance with pressure. A woman may begin to associate obedience with emotional suffering rather than spiritual peace. This misunderstanding can weaken her relationship with Allah. Islam teaches balance, not burden. Allah describes His guidance as light, not chains. Guilt that leads away from peace is not from Allah. A woman must learn to examine guilt carefully. Does it lead her to self-improvement and repentance, or does it trap her in endless self-blame? Does it bring her closer to Allah, or make her fear Him in an unhealthy way? These questions reveal whether guilt is healing or controlling. Allah does not shame His servants into obedience. He invites them with wisdom and mercy. Releasing manipulative guilt requires courage. It means recognizing that not every uncomfortable feeling is a sign of wrongdoing. Sometimes discomfort comes from growth, boundary setting, or truth. Islam supports these when they protect faith and dignity. A woman who releases guilt-based control regains clarity and confidence. True healing guilt leads to peace after repentance. It does not linger endlessly. When guilt never resolves and only deepens anxiety, it is not serving faith. Allah forgives sincerely and completely. He does not hold hearts hostage. A woman who understands this stops allowing guilt to dictate her decisions. She chooses wisdom over pressure and clarity over fear. This choice strengthens her faith and protects her peace. Guilt is not meant to control the believer. It is meant to guide. When it no longer heals, it must be questioned. And when a woman frees herself from manipulative guilt, she walks closer to Allah with confidence, balance, and peace. Distance can be a form of mercy. Distance is often misunderstood as rejection, punishment, or coldness, but Islam teaches that distance can be a form of mercy when closeness becomes harmful. Allah does not require His servants to remain in environments that continuously wound the heart, weaken faith, or drain emotional strength. Sometimes distance is not chosen out of anger, but out of wisdom. A woman may step back not because she lacks love, but because love without boundaries has begun to harm her soul. Mercy does not always look like constant presence. Sometimes mercy is creating space so the heart can heal, breathe, and regain balance. Allah is Al-Latif, the most gentle, and His mercy often arrives quietly, through clarity rather than confrontation. When distance brings relief instead of regret, it is often Allah guiding the heart toward protection, not separation. Distance becomes mercy when it prevents greater harm. Many relationships deteriorate not because people step back too early, but because they stay too long without boundaries. Resentment builds, patience collapses, and respect erodes. Islam does not want relationships to end in bitterness. Distance, when chosen early and calmly, can preserve what closeness would destroy. A woman who steps back with dignity protects her heart from hardening. She avoids words spoken in anger and actions taken in exhaustion. This restraint is mercy to herself and to others. Allah rewards restraint that prevents injustice, even within families. Sometimes distance allows reflection. Constant closeness can blur judgment and intensify emotions. When space is created, clarity returns. A woman may finally see patterns she ignored, behaviors she normalized, or limits she crossed. This awareness is not cruelty, it is guidance. Allah often uses distance to remove noise so truth can be heard. In that silence, the heart reconnects with Him. Prayer becomes focused, thoughts settle, and faith regains strength. This spiritual renewal is a form of mercy that closeness could not provide. Distance can also soften hearts. When interactions are reduced, expectations lessen, conflict no longer escalates, and communication becomes more intentional. Some relationships improve not through constant presence, but through respectful space. Allah knows the nature of hearts, and He allows distance to heal what arguments cannot. A woman who steps back may find that peace returns not only to her life, but to the relationship itself. This outcome is mercy, even if it was painful at first. Many women fear distance because they associate it with guilt. But Islam does not equate distance with disobedience. Mercy can exist alongside boundaries. A woman can maintain respect, dua, and kindness while limiting access. Allah judges intention, not proximity. When distance is chosen to preserve faith and well-being, it carries reward. Allah does not punish His servants for protecting what He entrusted to them. Distance also restores balance. When emotional energy is constantly consumed by difficult relationships, other areas of life suffer. Worship weakens, joy fades, and self-worth declines. Stepping back allows a woman to realign her priorities. She begins to invest in what nourishes her soul instead of what exhausts it. This rebalancing is mercy from Allah, guiding her back to equilibrium. Sometimes distance reveals truth. Those who respect boundaries will honor them. Those who seek control will resist them. This revelation helps a woman discern who values her peace and who benefits from her exhaustion. Allah brings clarity through action, not words. Distance exposes intentions without confrontation. Distance does not mean hatred, it means wisdom. It means choosing peace over chaos and healing over harm. A woman who understands this walks with confidence rather than guilt. She knows that mercy sometimes requires stepping away. Allah replaces what is left for His sake. When distance is chosen with sincerity, Allah fills the space with strength, clarity, and tranquility. This compensation is part of His mercy. Distance can be mercy. When it brings peace, protects faith, and restores dignity, it is not separation, it is divine care in action. Allah replaces what you protect for His sake. When a woman chooses to protect her peace, her faith, and her dignity for the sake of Allah, she is never choosing loss, even if it feels like it at first. Allah is Al-Adil and Al-Kareem, perfectly just and infinitely generous. He does not take something from His servant without replacing it with what is better for her soul. Sometimes the replacement is visible and immediate, and sometimes it unfolds quietly over time, but it always comes with wisdom. A woman may step away from a relationship, a dynamic, or an environment that harms her, and initially feel emptiness or fear, but Allah does not leave hearts empty when they choose Him. He fills that space with strength, clarity, and peace that could never exist alongside chaos. Protecting something for Allah's sake is an act of trust, and Allah never betrays the trust of His servants. What is lost for Allah is never truly lost. It is transformed. Many women fear that by protecting themselves, they will be left alone or deprived of love. But Allah is the one who provides companionship, support, and emotional sustenance. When a woman removes herself from harm out of obedience and wisdom, Allah often replaces what was draining her with what nurtures her. This replacement may come in the form of inner calm, renewed faith, supportive people, or opportunities for growth she never imagined. Allah knows what the heart truly needs, even when the heart itself is unsure. Letting go for Allah's sake opens doors that attachment kept closed. The fear of loss often comes from forgetting who controls provision. Allah does. Allah's replacement is not always another person. Sometimes He replaces chaos with tranquility, confusion with clarity, and emotional noise with stillness. These gifts are invaluable, even if they are not immediately recognized. A woman who once lived in constant tension may suddenly experience emotional stability. This peace allows her to worship with presence, to think clearly, and to live with intention. Such replacement is a form of mercy. Allah does not want His servant weighed down by what harms her. When she chooses Him, He lightens her burden. There are moments when Allah replaces loss with growth. The woman becomes stronger, wiser, and more grounded. She learns discernment, self-respect, and emotional resilience. These qualities are not easily gained through ease. Allah uses what she protects for His sake to elevate her character. She becomes less dependent on others and more reliant on Him. This reliance strengthens her heart and stabilizes her faith. The replacement may not look like what she expected, but it is exactly what she needs. Allah also replaces what is lost with clarity of purpose. When emotional turmoil is removed, a woman can finally hear her own thoughts and her own prayers. She reconnects with goals she abandoned and values she neglected. This clarity allows her to build a life aligned with her faith rather than shaped by pressure. Allah's replacement brings direction, not distraction. It centers the heart. Sometimes Allah replaces harmful closeness with healthier distance. This distance creates space for healing, reflection, and renewal. In that space, the woman begins to recognize how much she endured and how much she grew. Allah shows her that what she thought was loss was actually protection. The heart begins to feel gratitude where it once felt grief. This transformation is divine. Allah's replacement also restores dignity. A woman who protects herself for Allah's sake regains her sense of worth. She no longer defines herself by who stayed or who left. She defines herself by her relationship with Allah. This dignity becomes a shield, guarding her from future harm. Allah honors those who honor themselves within His limits. The replacement Allah gives often strengthens trust. When a woman sees that choosing Allah did not destroy her life but improved it, her iman deepens. She learns that obedience brings safety, not deprivation. This trust becomes a foundation for future decisions. She no longer fears choosing Allah first. Allah may replace what is lost with new relationships rooted in respect, balance, and faith. These connections feel different because they do not demand self-erasure. They feel safe because they honor boundaries. Allah sends people who align with the heart's healed state. This is not coincidence, it is compensation. Not every replacement arrives quickly, but every replacement arrives with wisdom. Allah's timing is precise. What matters is the sincerity of the choice. When a woman protects her peace, faith, and dignity for Allah's sake, she is never abandoned. Allah replaces what she leaves with what brings her closer to Him. Allah replaces what you protect for His sake, sometimes with peace, sometimes with strength, sometimes with clarity, but always with something better for your soul, because Allah never takes without giving and never asks without rewarding. Protecting your peace is not disobedience. It is discernment. You are not commanded to remain where your heart is constantly wounded, your faith is weakened, and your soul is exhausted. Allah sees what you endure in silence, and He does not ask you to sacrifice your well-being to keep others comfortable. Sometimes distance is the only way healing can begin. Sometimes silence is the only way dignity survives. And sometimes stepping back is the most faithful decision you can make. Be kind, be respectful, but do not stay where your peace is destroyed, even if it is family. When you protect what Allah entrusted to you, He protects what matters most in your life. Choose peace, trust Allah,